Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 272 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How you doing today, Richard?
Hey, Seth. Preview season is finally wrapped up.
Oh, yeah, that it went by very quickly, but good lord, do we get a lot of cards in 1 week's time. So we still have a ton of cool things from Ikoria to talk about today, and that'll be the main focus of our cast. But before we get to that, we have another co-host in Krim. What's up today, Krim?
Morning, Seth. As you had mentioned, I'm used to towards the end of spoiler season, there's nothing crazy, but yeah, this time we've got a doozy.
Yeah, so basically today's cast, we have a pretty long list of exciting, interesting Ikoria cards we wanted to talk about. So that's going to be the main focus of our podcast for today, talking about Ikoria. We'll probably get into some fish mail at the end, but that's the plan. Before we jump into it, a reminder that our show today is once again brought to you by Spikes Academy, and they recently launched a new control course with Corey Burkhart. So if you like to make your opponent's life miserable with counter spells and card advantage, say you're someone like Krim, this is the perfect course for you. You can check them out over at spikesacademy.com and learn from the very best players in the world. So thank you to Spikes Academy for supporting the show. And let's talk some Ikoria. So before we get to the individual cards, now that we've seen the entire set, 2 weeks ago, we knew there was a monster theme. We saw some Vivian art. Yeah. Now we know the full set. Did your hype level go up, down, unchanged, now that we actually know the actual cards in Ikoria, compared to just knowing some monster theme set was coming?
Oh, for me, it definitely went up. I didn't think there was much more they could do. I was mentioning, I thought they were going to trail off towards the end there, but once I saw the tri-lands, I was like, hold on, there's still more. There's still more on top of these tri-lands.
Yeah, I think, strangely enough, the end of preview season, they actually released a lot more cards. They started with, unplayable companions, and then towards the end, we got good companions, we got ultimatums, we got tri-lands. We're going to talk about all that today, but I actually feel a lot of the good cards came later in preview season, which is different. Normally they just kind of spill it all out at the beginning.
Yeah, and they even held over some of the best cards, or at least good cards, for the final spoiler dump on the very last day, which usually with the final spoiler dump, you see some semi-playable commons that you're like, oh, maybe that'll be okay in draft. But we actually had really good cards right up to the end of the spoiler season. So even though the 1 week pace was, I think it was a little too much, honestly, for 2 sets. Maybe it'd be fine for 1 set, but 2 sets in 1 week was kind of spoiler overload for me. I do like how they didn't just dump all the good stuff the first couple days and actually had some really exciting cards left over at the end, which means we have some really exciting cards to talk about today, even though it's technically our second podcast about Ikoria spoilers. So, Richard, why don't you guide us through some of these exciting cards?
All right, let's start off with the ultimatums. So they brought back ultimatums. So they are 7 CMC, all colored mana. And then I'll explain to you what each of the cards are. So Abzan is Eerie Ultimatum. Return any number of permanents with different names from the graveyard to the battlefield. Emergent is Sultai. Search your library for 3 monocolored cards with different names and exile them. An opponent chooses 1. Shuffle that card in your library. You may cast the other 2 without paying their mana costs. Genesis Ultimatum is a teamer one. Look at the top 5 cards. Put any number of permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield. The rest into your hand. Inspired Ultimatum. Gain 5 life. Deal 5 damage to any target. You draw 5 cards. That's Jeskai. And my favorite, Ruinous Ultimatum, Mardu. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control.
So, they definitely upped the power level on ultimatums, I would say, compared to the first go around. I think Cruel Ultimatum was probably the gold standard of ultimatums from their first run. And I think Cruel Ultimatum, if it was in Ikoria, probably the second to least powerful out of all the ultimatums. So I think in general, these are just really, really strong. Of course, they are 7 mana. You do need a lot of specific colors of mana. So even though they're strong, it's not like they're going to show up in every deck or anything. But if you resolve these, you're going to get a ton of value almost across the board. Like, all of them offer a ton of value.
I don't think I've ever played a game where I lost after casting a cruel, like any kind of ultimatums. I definitely have lost well before it. Maybe that's because I was trying to do it. but I can tell you that casting these ultimatums might be one of the most exciting things to do. And it's so cool to see it back in standard. I mean, like, I'm like, my second favorite is Ruinous Ultimatum, but my first one is actually, I don't know, it might be the least talked about one. It's the Inspired Ultimatum, the Jeskai one.
Oh, the one that gains you 5 life, because it's a white card.
Look. Okay. This is almost Sphinx's Revelation, right? It's almost Sphinx's Revelation. It's sorcery speed, yes, and it's not flexible in its cost in any way, shape, or form. But with 3 fairy, I could be doing this at instant speed. I mean, I don't know. I kind of like this, and I don't know, maybe the Fires decks just got a lot more spicy.
Honestly, I don't think Inspired Ultimatum is bad. I know I've, like, kind of made fun of it a bunch of times. I just think, like, when you compare it to return literally any number of permanents from your graveyard, the Sultai one is basically you win the game if you resolve this in Commander. Like, it just feels less exciting to me than some of the other ones, but I do agree that in Standard, it's probably a decent one. I think, for me in Standard, I think Ruinous Ultimatum's actually probably the best one, in my opinion.
Really?
I feel like, I mean, we're in this format where you have all these food tokens, and you have Fires of Invention, and you have, like, all these weird permanents, planes with tons of planeswalkers, and I feel like just get rid of everything of your opponents for 7 mana actually offers a decent amount of value.
I think like, Inspired is the best. Because,
whoa, Richard and I agree on that one. Yes.
So Ruinous Ultimatum, normally by the time you get to 7 mana, you're like top decking and stuff, and if the board is super full, you're probably already dead. So in my mind, it's A, Mardu colors, and B, usually the board is stable if you've made it to 7 mana. Whereas Inspired Ultimatum, like Fires is a thing, right? I think Fires is where most likely you'll play these ultimatums. And yeah, they'll just take 5 new cards, cast the best card out of whatever they draw after doing Inspired Ultimatum. So I actually think that is the most likely to get played. Like, who's gonna play Mardu and get to 7 mana? Like, that's pretty hard, right? Like, it's really like it will be the Fires deck with the Ruinous Ultimatum, right? Like,
yeah, that's my only thing about it. It's the one ultimatum that's like, if you look at all the other ultimatums, or I mean specifically 3 of them, they have a color called green. And now, with how good green, like, I don't know, it's this new color, it's coming up, in Standard, and it's got a lot of ramp, it's got a lot of things it can do, and it can get to 7 pretty easily. Mardu, I don't know, like, that is a color combination that I'm still waiting to see, if it turns out to be good, but, that's, obviously Ruinous Ultimatum better in, like Commander, but, like, I don't know, Mardu. What do we have for Mardu now? I mean,
we have Fires of Invention, right? Like,
right.
You get to 7 lands, you cast Inspired Ultimatum, draw your Ruinous Ultimatum, and then ruin them, right? Like,
yeah. But you see, like, now Mardu, like that, like, yes, you could say that Inspired doesn't have green in it. That's sweet new color. But the thing is, it does have. The decks that can play this and cast this, it has ways to get to the late game. I don't know what, like, Mardu looks like right now. It's a bit early to fully write it off as, like, you know, not the best one in Standard, but if it turns out Mardu can get to the late game, yeah, obviously, like, one-sided board wipes are sweet, but this just feels like something I want to grab out of my sideboard with Fae of Wishes.
I actually think the other one I can see an argument for is Genesis Ultimatum, the Teamer one, exactly for what you were talking about. It's just, like, so incidental to get to 7 mana if you're playing blue and green. Like, you have Uros and Nissas and Grow Spirals, and then even if it's just like draw 5 cards and put some stuff into play, that doesn't seem like that bad considering your Simic deck can get there so quickly. So I think, like, green is a big deal, like you were mentioning. I think as far as the effect, Genesis Ultimatum is probably worse than Inspired Ultimatum for most decks, but it is just so easy to get to 7 mana if you're in Simic.
Is there any way to filter mana in Standard? Like, we have Nissa.
Prismite, Richard. Remember? We took the 7 Dwarfs Challenge. Prismite.
Just totally negates your Nissa. Like, yes, I double my green mana, then I make it all blue. Wait a minute.
Something isn't right here.
Second question, though. discounting standard and discounting like modern and stuff, 7 mana, like ultimatums in general don't really see play in modern at this point. It's just too fast.
Seth. Whoa.
I know, Krim. You cast a cruel ultimatum once after getting run over by mono red a few times.
No. I casted it against Paul too. Paul Cheon, and he was playing Splinter Twin. You know how good that feels?
But what about for Commander? I think that you kind of flip the paradigm a little bit, and I think the ones that are best in Standard are actually not necessarily the best in Commander. Which ultimatum are you most excited for in Commander?
Oh, Ruinous. and Emergent.
How about destroying 3 opponents worth of stuff? Like, come on.
I mean, Ruinous
super
is like,
in Garrick's Wake for 2.
Yeah,
two
in Garrick's
less
Wake
mana.
is 7. This is also 7, albeit with colored cost. So you destroy like every. It's like Vandal Blast plus in Garrick's Wake plus.
It's Mardu Cyclonic Rift.
Oh, it is more than a cycle. Oh, it's so good. I mean, see, that's the thing. It's between this and Emergent in Commander, because Emergent, I can actually see it where I just go off and win the game, right? Like Enter the Infinite, Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, and something like that, and then just get my whole deck, win the game.
Yeah, I actually am a little worried about Emergent Ultimatum being unfun in Commander. I know, like, in Commander, there's a lot of things that cost 7 or more mana that essentially win the game if they resolve, but Emergent Ultimatum, it is very much like, if this resolves and you built your deck properly, you should just win the game when it resolves. You should be able to get a combination of cards that is just like game over no matter what your opponents choose. So, I also think Eerie Ultimatum is pretty sweet in Commander. Just like the potential of reanimating like 20 permanents or something, because you get back all your lands, you get back whatever enchantments and planeswalkers and creatures. I don't think it's busted to the level of Emergent Ultimatum, but I do think I would definitely play Eerie Ultimatum in some Abzan Commander decks.
I think if you're just playing Abzan, you just have Eerie Ultimatum, right? I mean, it won't be like crazy busted like you had mentioned, because I feel like everybody polices the graveyard pretty efficiently in Commander.
Planar Void.
Yes, correct. Planar Void, aka Make Me Concede, on turn 1. Like, I think Genesis Ultimate, like all the ultimatums, except for, actually, I think Jeskai is the least playable. It's actually unplayable in Commander for me. But like, all these ultimatums in Commander are actually really, really good. I think Emergent Ultimatum is the one that actually is just broken. Ruinous Ultimatum, obviously amazing. And Genesis Ultimatum is just, whatever is playing like Genesis Wave, this is just another copy, but a smaller version, right? So I think these are all pretty solid for Commander, with Emergent sitting at the top. And no one should play the Jeskai.
Well, I'm a little sad you can't Boseiju these spells, so they can't be countered. But you could copy them, right? Your opponent tries to go off with like Genesis Ultimatum, you go off by forking it first. See if you could lock them out somehow. Or like Emergent Ultimatum, try to get an instant speed win by forking someone else's. Like, it's possible.
I mean, if you're playing blue in Commander, I think like almost everyone plays like Narset's Reversal, right?
That's got the new free redirect spell.
Yeah.
Oh, that doesn't copy though, does it?
No.
That just changes targets. Oh,
the red one for Commander. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could change who gains 5 life, and or whatever.
Yes, I will take that 5 life.
All right, next up, Wizards dropped us a very pleasant surprise with tri-lands that have the basic land subtypes. So, for example, Plains, Swamp, Forest, which means they are now fetchable. And for whatever reason, they have cycling 3 on them.
Heck yeah.
So we have new names. So Abzan is now Indatha Triome. Ketria is the Temur one. Jeskai is Raugrin. Savai is Mardu. And Sultai is Zagoth. So, for example, Zagoth is Swamp, Forest, Island fetchable. Enters the battlefield tapped, obviously, cycling 3.
I don't think those names are going to catch on.
It took me
I think people are
forever.
going to stick with the old ones.
Yeah, it took me forever to remember all the cons ones. So like, I was like, okay, this is not Bug, this is Sultai. And now I have to, I'm just going to call him that. I mean, maybe I remember some of these, but like, most likely not. However, the day before these got printed, Literally the day I was streaming and I Magic is hosting me and all this other stuff, right? So like I'm just like talking, there's no way, like, because people are like, did you see the rumors that there might be Tri-lands? Like, there's no way we would ever have Tri-lands. That's just ridiculous. Lo and behold, the day after, these get spoiled, and I just immediately think of the meme where the dude's putting the clown makeup on, because I'm just like, oh man.
So I think these lands are obviously very strong. Like, they're really good for standard. Tri-lands, even the old, like, just no upside, come into play tap Tri-lands were essentially staples every time they were in standard. And we are going into wedge standard, so these are going to be super key for building standard mana bases. I think that also, like, multicolor commander decks, these are great. I think the more interesting question is older formats. What do you think about fetch land formats like modern? How much play do you think these actually will see? Because I feel like that's been actually pretty hotly debated.
I'd probably take this over like creature lands at this point.
I mean, nah, like how many decks do you play that like requires serious 3 mana color requirements? Like in modern, coming into play tapped is like a death sentence, right? So I don't think you would play this unless you're playing a very specific deck.
I mean, yeah.
When was the last time you had, like, Jund, I think, is probably a deck because you're trying to play Croxa and things like that where you actually need these and then you can't play, like, Scavenging Ooze. But, like, I don't want my lands tapped. That's, like, that's crazy, right? So I don't think I'd even play it there. So I don't know where you'd play this.
I kind of feel like decks can get away with playing like a copy or something, because you can find, like, just leave them floating around in your deck. Eventually you'll find a turn when you can crack a fetch and get a tap land without it being a big deal, and then like that's the turn to get it. I think for me the biggest potential in modern is just the ability to splash really easily. Like, you already can kind of do it, but I think an easy example is maybe you're playing like, I don't know, a Gruul deck, some sort of Gruul-based deck where Wooded Foothills is your main fetch land. If you, like, have one copy of Inditha Triome, you can have it, like, Thoughtseize and Rest in Peace out of your sideboard or something for a pretty low opportunity cost. So I think maybe that is the easiest way for them to see play outside of, like, Niv decks and other 5-color decks that already, if you're already playing the old Tri-lands, these are just, like, an obvious, like, strictly better upgrade over the old ones.
But in your example, I'd rather just play like 1 or 2 overgrown tombs, right? Like the problem is, like, if your turn 1 and turn 2 lands are one of these triomes, like, obviously if it's sitting in your deck, then yeah, you can just fetch them up whenever you feel like it. But if, like, your opening hand is 2 triomes, like, it's over, right? Like,
I like to call that the Dryad Arbor problem, where you play 1 Dryad Arbor because you think, oh, I'm going to fetch this out and blow someone out by, like, chump blocking or something, and then you always have it in your opening hand, and then it always gets, like, gut shot, and then you lose. So I definitely know what you're talking about with drawing these cards naturally, but I think it's like a one-of. Maybe you can get around that, although my Dryad Arbor experiences make me think that maybe that's not as guaranteed as I would like it to be, but so you think like no play, Richard, or very close to no play?
I think very specific decks. And if they do see play, like maybe replacing creature lands, like you can only have so many tap lands in your deck. Like I feel like most people don't care about colors, right? Like you have, like a lot of decks are like playing like Astrolabe and things like that, or they're just not like color heavy, right? Like you don't really need, like, if you're trying to cast an ultimatum, yeah, you're gonna need some of these lands, right? But most people just play like 2-color decks, or the 5-color decks are things that are like affinity or something like that, right? Like, whereas like it doesn't matter, you have stuff to make 5 colors. Humans, like you have Aether Vial and stuff like that, right? So
you also just can't have tap lands in humans.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like, are there decks with that strict color requirements?
I only see this more so just because I think the ability to fix the mana and the cycling is nice.
Yeah.
Like I do really like the cycling attached to it, but I don't think it's like going to be like replacing, like, I don't know, a Hallowed Fountain anytime soon, right? Like it's just like a 1 or 2 of. I see this making bigger waves in Pioneer. Cause Pioneer's mana base is, you know, kind of meh. Like this makes, I think, like you have way better mana in Pioneer.
I've played Guild Gates or whatever in Pioneer, so yeah.
I actually am kind of skeptical because you don't have fetch lands in Pioneer. Like, I'm sure there's like, I don't know, Farseek or something. I don't even know if Farseek's actually in Pioneer. But
that's what makes it even more important, because you can't fetch it. You need your land to like generate all the colors, right?
Yeah.
But
it's nice to have like also like your drowned catacombs and stuff, like glacial fortresses to come in and play untapped.
Okay, that's a good argument, because I was gonna say, like, the original Tri-lands, outside of, I think, basically Niv, don't really see any play in Pioneer, and they're all in Pioneer, and if you can't fetch them, what is your upside? Like, cycling for 3? And I mean, that is an upside, but 3 is a pretty high cycling cost, so I don't know, like, if they're not fetchable, but you're right, turning on, like, Glacial Fortress, and having other lands come into play untapped is an upside. They do work with, like, Nissas and other synergies that care about specific basic land types. I think that's the other thing we missed in Modern is, stuff like Tribal Flames. Like, it's pretty easy to turn on, like, Domain with only a couple of lands, so that might be another place. Maybe you fetch this out and just get all 3 off-color land types in your, like, Gruul Zoo deck, so you can turn on Tribal Flames for 5 or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that this opens up a lot, so I do like it. But like in older formats, it is, like Richard said, a little scary. And like I had mentioned, I think if I were to replace anything, it's most likely going to be the creature lands, because it's like, yeah, you really can't have like 6 tap lands in your deck or you're dead.
Yeah. I hope this takes off so I can choke and boil more fools.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, dude, that means, yeah, like all your hate, like all the hate cards have like more things they shut off. Like choke now like turns off even more lands.
But that hard cast Street Wraith is gonna wreak havoc with that Swamp Walk because of your drive. Yo, that's legit scary. I've died so many times to that thing because it has Swamp Walk, right? Like,
I forget it has that, but it's all like, I do also, by the way, just to like touch up a little bit on this in Standard, I think we'll see more 4-color decks now. I was already like, you've already seen like Esper like splashing red, right? Playing like Nico Bolas and stuff like that. I think now you can actually have that. I mean, I'm working on a deck. It's just called literally Not Green, right? It's Savai and Rogrin, I guess, Jeskai and Mardu put together. And like, I think this opens up just the mana base and what you can do in Standard by a lot.
I think it makes Fire's deck even better, right? So now you can actually hard cast your stuff if needed. The lands coming to play tap don't matter, and then in late game you cycle it because your mana is useless anyway, right? Into your actual threat, and then you cast it with Fires. So I actually think Fires gets a big boost from them. All right, next up we have the return of Narset. Narset of the Ancient Way. 1 blue, red, white. So 4 CMC, legendary planeswalker Narset, 4 starting loyalty. +1, you gain 2 life. Add blue, red, or white. Spend this mana only to cast a non-creature spell. -2, draw a card, then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Narset deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to target creature or planeswalker. -6, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this emblem deals 2 damage to any target.
I, at first, was not too high on this card. Because it's 4 mana. I still think this card could have been 3 mana. Just with granted how powerful everything is in Standard right now, I think this could have been potentially 3 mana, or even the -2 could have just been like a -1. Heck, after Oko, just make it a +1.
Yeah,
right?
should have started 6 starting loyalty, have a +1 there.
Yeah, but like I do like, I'm coming around on the card. I do think it's pretty cool. This is obviously for this like the non-creature spells matter deck, like the control decks and stuff. The -2, the big part is that it's a May. I think that's pretty cool. That also allows us to, like, if we ever get, a little ultimatum flooded, we can deal 7 to anything, and it picks off a planeswalker or a creature, which is pretty major. And it ults pretty quickly. So this is starting to grow on me. I think this card is a lot better than I initially gave it credit for, but I still think with how powerful Standard is, this could have just been 3 mana.
Yeah, I think for me, Narset, I think it's a decent planeswalker. I think if you look at it, it protects itself. The +1 is okay, I guess. It gets to ultimate quick. It's only 4 mana, so it hits a lot of marks for a decent planeswalker, but it's just hard for me to get excited about Narset when we have, like, Teferis and Nissas and so many, like, really strong planeswalkers. So I feel like maybe Narset's one of those cards that's good, but just not better than what we already have going on, and it might have to wait a bit until after rotation to see like a ton of play. But I do think like Jeskai Super Friends seems like a natural home. One of the upsides is it refers to non-creatures rather than instant or sorcery, so you can get rid of like extra planeswalkers. You said ultimatum flooding, also like legendary planeswalker flooding. It can get you out of that. So maybe some sort of like Jeskai Fires Friends, Jeskai Super Friends, or just Jeskai Controls. So I think it's playable, but I don't think it's like busted or anything by any stretch.
Yeah, it's definitely not busted. I
think you guys are sleeping on Narset. I think Narset is busted.
Hey, what?
I think people are severely underestimating that -2 because you draw a card, and then you can discard, so then you don't go down a card, right? It's basically -2 removal. So you can -2 twice, for free without spending mana. And also, like, that plus gets you closer to your big scary cards, like ultimatums and things like that. The ultimate comes pretty quick, like plus, and then ultimate. So I actually think she's really good. Like, you basically just turn any card into, in your hand into removal, and planeswalker removal at that. So that's a little scary. Like, what's an aggro deck gonna do, right? You drop a creature, they drop Narset, they minus, and then you drop another creature, they minus, and they play like another threat afterwards. Like, I don't know. I think she's actually pretty good. Like that. But that's a double
Richard,
minus.
Is it going to replace Jason Legacy? So another reason I'm skeptical of Narset is if you've been listening to the podcast,
standard playable.
If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, back in the early days, there was another Narset Planeswalker that was printed, Narset Transcendent back in Dragons of Tarkir, and people flipped for Narset. It was like $70, and it was going to replace Jason Legacy, and then for like the next 6 months, it was the card that lost the most value every single week till it was down to like $5 or something, and it just was absolutely horrible. So I'm naturally a little skeptical of Narsets in specific. I see another 4-mana Narset. I have bad experiences with Narsets in the past being way overhyped, so that's another reason I'm a little skeptical of this one.
But this Narset's so much better than...
It's like 2 minuses. I don't think we've ever had a planeswalker that you could do double removal. Like, it's usually removal plus and then removal.
Jace the Mind Sculptor. You could do it 3 times if you wanted.
Are we going there? Is Narset the new Jace?
Oh my gosh. Throw out your Jaces. I do think this is a lot better than you know what a lot of people are giving credit for, me included initially, but I don't know if it's busted. I mean, come on. Even the minus doing it twice, it's good, but like I just don't like that there's no set amount, right? Like it could be random. What if I'm like, I don't know, I have opts, like haha, I can like gut shot something.
I mean, the good news is, like, if you have low CMC cards, you can play them all with your mana, right?
Ooh.
If you have high CMC cards, you can also +1 and play them with Narset, or you can discard them to, like, nuke something.
That is the biggest draw. Like, yeah, like, if I'm, like, the amount of games where I'm, like, stuck at 4 or 5 mana, and then I draw, like, a 6 or 7 drop, it does happen. And it is nice that I can use that as a way, like, for efficient removal. So, I don't think she's bad, I just don't think she's busted.
All right. Next up, we have maybe a card you'll agree is more busted. Kinna, Bonder Prodigy. Green, blue, 2/2, legendary creature, human druid. Whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. 5, blue, green. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Do you see the color combination and its cost?
This is...
If I see that in any card, and if it's released from 2019 to present, I will just automatically assume it's busted. I don't need to read the text.
So good.
I just need to see the flavor that, and then I read the rest of it. I don't know, like, it's not like Simic needed more ways to accelerate their mana.
So, when we talk about busted, like, in non-Commander formats, is this a card that we're expecting to do things out? I mean, obviously in Commander, there's infinite combos, it turns on your mana, right? It's insane in Commander, no doubt about that, but, like, Standard, Pioneer, Modern, are we expecting it to do things there as well?
Standard?
Standard, yes.
Yes. I mean, I am not even kidding. I see Simic, I just assume it's broken. Because it's, first off, it's not hard for them to, like, get to 7 mana, right? They untap with a Nissa and they can do this easily. Like there's so many things in like Simic, like in between Uro, Growth Spiral, and this now. Like they get to their mana super easily, and then whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, I don't know. Like they already play what's the elemental O3, right? Like it's like why not? You know,
like there's just so many ways to get, like you could turn 3 in this, like you just turn 2 Paradise Druid, turn 3. Oh wait, no, you can't do it. No, I lied. You need to turn 1 Mana Dork.
But I mean, how different is this than like Leyline of Abundance as far as standard is concerned? Like, isn't it similar? And Leyline doesn't really see
Leyline doesn't. Leyline doesn't have that second part.
Yeah. Like if you don't actually leyline it, it's like hard to cast. This is a 2-drop. It's a 2/2 body. It pressures planeswalkers. But then you can pay 7 to just get a real threat off your deck, right? Whereas Leyline, you pump dorks.
Yeah. And this is at instant speed, right? You can just put this, if you don't deal with this immediately and they have open mana, it's like, all right, cool. Well, I don't need to commit to the like anything from my hand to the board. I'm just going to pay 7 every turn.
I'm actually a little skeptical of this card outside of Commander. Like, I could see how it's powerful, and I can see, like, the cute things it can do. Everyone's like, oh, like, now my Astrolabe taps for a mana. Like, that's so cool. And that is cool, but I kind of feel like this card might end up being too cute. Like, it dies to everything.
I think any deck that plays a lot of mana dorks will play this in the older formats. I think it's just, like, a crazy mana doubler. So if you're already playing, like, 1-drop mana dorks, and I think in standard we have like Paradise Druid and things like that.
Yeah, you
got the goose.
Paradise Druid.
You can goose too. Yeah. Like there's a lot of ways to abuse this. Into Nissa, right? The answer is like you abuse into your Nissa or like your giant finisher, right?
It is legendary. I'm surprised they didn't just make this not legendary, but you know what I mean? Like I do think this card, it's in a color combination like that is actually very dense. Like it has so many things that you need to remove anyways that I really think that, like, I don't know, dying to everything is true, but like it's in a color combination where it's just everything in that deck needs to go. Right, you have to kill it immediately on site.
The good news is it's creatures, right? And in existing Simic decks, it's possible you don't play this because if you look at the top 5 and find a Krasis, like it's useless, right? Yeah. So, or you find like more Nissas, like not what you wanted, right? So it's possible like the existing Simic decks don't play this, but if you drop like Godzilla or something onto the battlefield.
Agent of Treachery,
Wait, Agent of Treachery's human.
Oh, it's not human. So Cavalier or Cavaliers human? No, they're elementals, right?
Yeah, Cavaliers are fine.
Cavaliers, yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see in older formats, especially Pioneer, because Pioneer is such a mana dorky format anyway. There's a lot of decks built around Elvish, Mystic, Llanowar Elves. In those decks, this is kind of free. Like, if you play a Mana Dork on turn 1 and then, like, cast it, your Mana Dork is immediately, like, generating back a mana. If you got 2 Mana Dorks, it's actually free. And if you got a bunch of Mana Dorks or other non-land sources of mana, it can almost be like a ritual where it produces mana the turn it comes into play. So I think that that's definitely something that is interesting. Maybe some sort of, like, Elves deck in Modern could want it. They have a ton of things that tap for mana that's probably pretty powerful. And then I think maybe the non-land part of it is the part that needs to be more explored. Maybe there are mana rocks that when they tap for an extra mana are actually worth playing in formats like Modern or Pioneer, when if they tap for their normal mana, they're not.
I mean, Astrolabe is really one of them.
All right, next up we have Winona, Joiner of Forces, 2 red, white, 4/4 legendary creature, human warrior. Whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards in the library. You may put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until end of turn. Put the rest of the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order.
If Mardu has something going on, I think this is somewhere there in that deck.
Wait a minute. I just realized it's a non-human creature attacking. So you have to have like a non-human creature attacking, and then you have to have enough humans in your deck to like flip something useful into play.
Yeah.
That makes things a lot more difficult.
But you are looking at the top 6 cards, right? That is a decent amount.
And remember, it triggers whenever you attack with a creature. So if you just go like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop this, you're going to get 3 of those triggers.
Wait, potentially, what? Oh boy. Serious?
Yeah. So you get a whole bunch of shots. It's not 1 or more creatures. It's a creature. So you actually can go pretty deep. So I think you I think this card is actually really underrated. I think even if you look at decks like, just say Modern Zoo, for example, they usually have like some Wild Nakatos, some Tarmogoyfs, but then they also just randomly have things that are humans that they want anyway, like Burning Tree Emissaries and Hidden Herbalists. I feel like you don't build around this card. You just have a deck that has a mixture of humans and non-humans, and since you get like 3 triggers whenever you attack, and it kind of has haste because it doesn't have to attack. You can just play this and attack with your other creatures. Even if you're just getting some random like Dark Confidant or Burning Tree Emissary, like, it's free. It's free value on a 4/4 for 4, which is already pretty decent stats. So I actually think this card I think this is one of my sleepers from the set that might be way better than people are realizing right now.
Yeah. I think that's because much like to Richard's surprise, it's whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, right? So that is true. That is pretty sweet. I like it. I don't know. It comes down to how good is red and white in standard, right? Like, I think if Mardu happens, I think this card is definitely there.
I think this is too magical Christmas land. Like, for you to get multiple triggers, it means you have multiple non-humans to attack, and then you look at the top 6, and then you gotta find multiple humans there. Like, I think most likely you get like 1 trigger, but I think like the mix is gonna kill it. Like, you're not, sometimes you're just gonna draw the wrong half of your deck. Like, all your humans are in your hand. And then for whatever, the top 6 will be non-humans. So I think this is too complex, and it's only a 4-mana 4/4. Like, it seems okay, but like, that's like limited stats, right? That's like a good, for 4 mana you can get so much more nowadays. So you really need the ability to work. And I think it's too cutesy. I think it's hard to build a deck to make it reliably work, but
okay, what about,
that's why Mardu. Snapdax, you'll have Dirgebat. Like, I think these, like, Dirgebat.
What are the humans you're dropping in? Like a 2/2 indestructor? Like, the human has to be good too, right?
You do have, like, access to other humans, like, I don't know, the fevered or fervored champion or whatever, if you wanted to. Depends how aggressive you want to get. Or maybe, I don't know. They're like, you have to sit down and look at it, but I think a Mardu deck is where, like, or a Hunted Nightmare or something like that, right? Like, is something you can grab with this, right? Like, I don't know.
Like, you attack with Regisaur and then you drop in like a human or something like that, right? Yeah, I can see that happening.
I mean, I'm actually kind of more interested in this in older formats, honestly, than standard. Like, think about just like Mardu Pyromancer, where you have like young Pyromancers making tokens, Lingering Souls makes 4 tokens, and then those decks are just naturally like young Pyromancer is a human, Magus of the Moon is a human, Seasoned Pyromancer is a human that makes non-human tokens. Like, even in a shell like that, it feels like you just like make some tokens, attack, and put all the creatures in your deck on the battlefield essentially on turn 4 or something. Like, I don't know. I feel like I don't think it takes that much work to build around it. I think it's going to be really difficult to build around. I don't like the I'm going to try to get Agent of Treachery into play off this. I think you just have to like incidentally have a deck that has a mixture of humans and non-humans and just like trust that the free value is enough, even if you're just hitting like 2/2s and whatnot.
All right. Next up, we have some companions. We have Lurrus of the Dream Den. 1 Ores of Hybrid. So 3 CMC. It's a 3/2 legendary creature, Cat Nightmare. Companion. Each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. Lifelink. During each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell from your graveyard with converted mana cost 2 or less.
I only like this in like Modern. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I only like it in Modern, maybe like older formats.
Yeah, I think the further back you go, the more broken it gets.
Like, can Jund play this? Because it's like, you could still play Kolaghan's Command, right? Because it's only permanent spells. So, like, or like Death Shadow or something like that.
Ooh, but of course, I never thought of this as a Jund card. So you cut the Bloodbraid. No, this is terrible. You can't even play Lily. This doesn't work. You need to have like a low to the ground deck.
Death Shadow. It didn't play Lily anyways.
So Death Shadow, the concern, I think, because that was one of the first things I thought of.
Street
Wraith is the one. Is that better? The lifelink? That is also true.
Oh yeah.
But like, is having one of these every game better than having Street Wraith? I think it might be. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's possible that it is, at least.
I mean, yeah, it is entirely possible to play this. Like, if it's gonna get played, I think it's something in Modern, but in Standard, I don't know how you could play a deck.
I don't think we have enough permanence in Standard that Like the older formats, like I think there are enough 2 CMC permanents that is probably like your spells can be more than 2, right? So that's fine. But also in Modern, like is a 3 mana 3/2 lifelink good enough? No. So you need something where you're actually bringing stuff back from the graveyard.
Richard, you can dust off your Bobs. If you just drop Lily, Bob is back. Right? Because you have a bunch of cheap cards.
Yes, so, I'm gonna have a 3 mana 3/2 lifelinker or a Lily out of the Veil.
But you can bring back like you could just keep doing the Croxa party if you wanted to, because Croaks is 2 mana.
Yeah,
like you
can bring back Titans with this, which is pretty good.
I think.
Well, just that Titan.
I think it's standard. This card's good not as a companion. Like I think just being able to recast Crocs every turn, or like. Maybe you have Mire Triton and Priest of Forgotten Gods and Witch's Oven. Like, I feel like this is a card that's really powerful. It reminds me of Emery almost when it's played fairly. Like, just cast it for 3 mana, recast stuff from your graveyard. So I think it has non-companion potential. The place where I think it's broken as a commander is going to be Legacy and Vintage, mostly because of how it interacts with Lion's Eye Diamond and also Black Lotus, I guess, if you're playing Vintage. But this is just a free roll in Storm style decks in Legacy. And in those decks, you're usually, Lion's Eye Diamond makes exactly enough mana to cast this. So then you cast that, which ups your Storm count. And then you can use it to recast the Lion's Eye Diamond, which also ups your Storm count. So I think the most obvious companion home is going to be Storm decks from Legacy backwards. I think it's just like a shoe-in for those decks.
You've got me thinking. I might just play this fairly. Like on turn 5, you just play it and then play a Goyf out of your graveyard. Like, that's pretty good. It's like a Bloodbraid Elf.
Sweet with Bobble too. Like if you're playing Mishra's Bobble, you just get a free card draw every turn for no mana, like Emery does almost.
Maybe you don't even need to beat the companion requirements and just play this as a 3 mana 3. I play Kitchen Finks, like basically Kitchen Finks here, right?
Yeah.
But is there even a companion that you would play in Constructed, like just because of its companion? Like, can we make any of them work?
Yeah. So how about Yorion? So Yorion is the Azorius one, 4/5. It's a 5 CMC. Legendary creature, Bird Serpent. Your starting deck contains at least 20 cards more than the minimum deck size. Flying, when Yorion enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you own and control. Return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step.
I think this is best companion. This one, even discounting the ability, which does naturally play with like Panharmonicons and stuff that I like, but I think this is the easiest one to play. I feel like playing all the other companions make you not play cards that your deck really wants. This just makes you play more cards. So you get to play everything you want. Yes, you're going to lose a little bit of consistency, but you gain an 8-card starting hand, essentially, and you get a reasonable creature as long as you have at least some blink value that you can take advantage of. I feel like this is going to show up in a lot of decks, in Standard, and also back to, like, Modern and Pioneer as well.
I mean, I just literally played a 250-card deck. So, like, this, to me, is just, like, only 80? Like, sure, you got it. I think this card is actually pretty decent. I mean, there is an Azorius Blink deck in Standard already. I don't know if it needs this, or at least to go over like 60 cards, but I mean, I think this of all the companion requirements, I think this is the easiest one to play. Either that or like Kahira or Karuga.
Yeah.
You guys tripping. This card's terrible.
Really?
Imagine how much worse your sideboard. What if I said to play this card, your sideboard is, first of all, it's 14 cards, but in reality, it's like 9 cards now or something because you had to pad your deck with like 20 other cards. And then in Standard, please. Like the card pool doesn't go that deep. You can't pad, like you can throw in more ops and stuff, but they're not free, right? They cost mana. You can't like just pad your deck out infinitely. So I actually think this is terrible. Like, your sideboard games will be significantly worse, if not your non-sideboard games. And for what? Like a 5 mana 4/5 flying? Like, if you have a blink deck, are there enough blink cards for an 80 card deck in Standard? Like, I don't know. This seems really difficult.
It's not that many more cards. It's not like Battle of Wits. I think when I think of cards that make you play a lot of cards, I think Battle of Wits, but there's a big difference between, 20 extra cards and like playing 3 extra decks or whatever it requires to actually win with Battle of Wits. So, I think the Blink deck in Standard, I would say that it's worth it to In the dark, we haven't got to actually play with it yet, but my guess is it's correct to go to 80 cards to play this in the blue-white blink deck, and maybe in other decks as well. I think the power of having an extra card in your starting hand is something people haven't grasped. When you look at, here's the best example for me, and then I'll let you say your thing, Grim. The best example for me is from what we know about mulligans. Average game, both players start with 7 cards in their opening hand. You assume it's 50-50 that either player will win. If one player mulligans to 6, so one player gets, one extra card in their starting hand, that shifts to 60-40. That's a huge change. If this is anywhere close to that impact, like having 8 cards versus 7 cards, I think it would definitely be worth it for a whole bunch of decks and a lot of other companions as well. Like, that's a huge shift in the percentage from exactly one additional card than your opponent has.
But in standard, and at least with London mulligans and everything, I mean, we've already seen in like the past year that card advantage doesn't necessarily always win the games anymore, right? There are so many things that are just powerful on board that can win on its own. So like, I do understand the risk of losing consistency. So like, yeah, maybe I have 8 cards, but like 4 of them are very irrelevant because I padded my deck. Right? So like, really you have 3 cards and inconsistency. So I get it.
I like Seth's argument, but my counter argument is, aren't games of Magic decided by how many more sideboard cards you drew than your opponent? Isn't that more important than like the extra like card
value.
in your hand? And then in this case, like extra
value.
mediocre-ish more, like it's not like the top tier, right? It's maybe like a 90% card or an 80% card.
I think that's especially true in older formats. I actually did like the math on it, and with a 60 card deck, if you have a 4 of in your deck, your odds of having your opening hand is like 39%, 40%. And if you up to 80 cards, you still have the same 4 of, the odds goes down to like 31%. So you're losing like an 8%, 9% chance of having your Rest in Peace or something after sideboarding your ley line. Does having this extra card in your hand make up for that? Are you gaining more than you're losing? That's where it becomes really hard to figure out without having actually played the card.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because all of these weird decks, I think Sam Black called this like the best card or whatever. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Other quick thing about standard is, it's insane with Thassa, because you blink this, and then you get to blink all your Elite Guard mages and Flibble Fips and Agent of Treachery. So this allows Thassa to essentially blink your entire team every turn, which is pretty busted in the blink deck.
You are then drawing a lot of cards, which is then thinning the deck.
And it's not.
You do all this to draw the one sideboard card you needed.
And it's permanent, so it resets your Elspeth Conqueror's Death. It can reset your Planeswalker loyalty. Like, it's like a Brago trigger.
Yeah.
Yes.
I do think Obosh, by the way, might be quietly underrated for like aggro decks and burn decks in older formats. Cause Bolt, all that stuff, that's all odd, by the way.
I feel, but you're never going to cast an even.
I mean,
like,
you lose out on Eidolon, but like, I do think having like double damage with Bolt, this doesn't die to push or Bolt. This lives past that. I mean, and you always have one, right? If you do the companion build, you always have one.
I like it in theory, and I do think going all odds is way easier than going all evens. My only concern is, when I was thinking the same thing, is 5 mana is a lot. If it was like 4 mana or 3 mana, but burn getting to 5 mana, like that's my big concern. I think it would be good if you got it on the battlefield, but does your burn deck get up to 5 mana consistently enough to make it worth it?
I mean, yeah, that's true, but at
burn
least
ramp.
if you do, you have one. You do
Birds
have
of
one.
Paradise burn.
Yeah. Well, it's also any permanent, so maybe like zoo decks, right? That do eventually get there, sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Song of Creation. 1 green, blue, red. 4 CMC. Teamer colors. Enchantment. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. When you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand.
I think this card is poop in standard.
Really?
But I don't think this card is good in standard. I think there's a lot of hype on it right now for standard, and maybe this is a card I'm going to be complaining about in a week, but the thing here is, right now, looking at it and thinking, unless some new deck comes out of this, I just don't think it's that great in standard. I do think that the older the format, I think in modern this is immediately broken, but like Standard, nah.
I think this card's busted. And I think
good in Standard, yes.
You think it is good in Standard?
Yeah, like you playing it fairly. So in older formats, I think this card is absurd. When you play it unfairly, there is no end step. You're going to win the game. But in Standard, like if you top deck it at like 5 mana or something, like you're probably empty handed, and then you can just chain like creatures together or something. Like you don't need to like just go off with like 1 mana cantrips, right? You could just play a 3-drop and a 4-drop. So I do think this will refill your hand, like quote unquote refill your hand pretty quickly. So I think it's actually pretty decent in Standard, but absurd in other formats.
I think it's absurd in all formats. And the reason I think that it's going to be absurd in Standard is I feel like we have mechanics that work really well with it. They already have powerful decks in Standard. Like the easy example is Adventures. Like Adventures lets you essentially like hide cards in the exile zone. So then after you discard your hand, you can cast 1, draw 2 cards, and just like restart the chain again the next turn and do that every turn. We also have like Jumpstart. We have Escape. We have a lot of ways to have castable things. And when you're drawing 2 cards and making an extra land drop every turn, like you don't need much to refuel. If you can cast a single adventure card from your exile zone, you're drawing 2 cards, which should find you something else that you can cast to draw 2 more cards. And that doesn't even include the decks people have been selling me with Riley. I've had a lot of people try to get around the downside of discarding your hand by just like having Riley out, and then you draw that many cards back thanks to Riley. So I think this card's absolutely absurd in older formats, and I think it's going to be really good in Standard too, just because of the mechanics we have in our current Standard.
I mean, I just think like the fact that it immediately comes like Narset is so popular too out of the blue decks. It scares me. It does scare me. Like that I'm playing this card, right? Like, is it, I don't know. Like, what are you cutting for it in the Adventures decks? Like, is this replacing your whatever the 5 mana spell? I don't think so.
It is really funny if you play this against an Narset. That is a big downside because that is just like discard your hand. I guess you get an extra land drop, but
I guess I'll cast Uro next turn.
Actually, does this fuel Uro? You want to discard your hand?
But like, it can't be worth it, right? Like, if I literally have 6 cards and I throw this away, like, I don't.
What about like?
It kind of reminds me of Jund, right? Like, you're just like, all right, we're just gonna chuck the whole hand out the window and play off the top of our deck. All right, next up we have Titan's Nest. 1 black, green, blue enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. Exile a card from your graveyard. Add a colorless mana. Spend this mana only to cast a colored spell without X in its mana cost.
When I first saw this, I thought this sucked. Because I was like, so I only get 1 mana? And I can only do this once a turn? That sucks. And then I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I read it again, and then I had this sinking feeling in my gut. I'm like, oh no. This card is very good.
All cards have delve now, basically.
Yeah,
like X spells and, colorless spells.
Sure, I can't cast Krasis. All right, cool. But the thing here is like, this thing is amazing. It doesn't, the only drawback is it does not do anything the turn it comes down. But like, holy cow, in the specific colors that I see there, like, oh yeah, this is really good. It may eat away at, like, this may slowly eat away at, like, the Uros and stuff, like, because you are taxing your graveyard, but I'm just, dude, that looks so good. Like, oh man, this just seems pretty sweet.
Oh, I think this card is absurd too. Like, I still, like, almost can't believe that they printed it. Like, we have a pretty long track record of, Delve being a broken mechanic. Every time, that's just like, what we know about Delve is it's always broken. Giving basically everything Delve is absurd, and even just surveilling 1 each turn is a nice little bonus. Like, it does do something, which is kind of cool, but I think this card is absurdly powerful. I'm like, my mind is kind of blown. We had like Wilderness Reclamation, which makes a lot of mana. We had Fires of Invention, which makes a lot of mana. This arguably makes even more mana than those do. Like, Wizards has clearly shown if you were a 4-mana enchantment, they're pretty fine with you making essentially infinite mana. We're pretty close to just like 4-mana enchantment, you get infinite mana, and Wizards are like, yeah, no problem. This will always work out. And both Wilderness Rec and Fires have been like legitimate top tier cards for as long as they've been in standard. So I have a hard time imagining that this card will not join them in the near future.
Time to play Leyline of the Void all the time.
Yeah, I don't know why. Like Hogak, Dig Through Time, Treasure Cruise. Like, what do all these cards have in common? Right? And like now we give it to every like build your own Hogak now, right? I guess that's the theme of Ikoria, right? So I don't know. It seems really good. We'll see how it goes in older formats. It is Sultai. It's harder to cast. But yeah, we'll see. It seems absurd. All right, last card. We have Slitherwisp. Blue, black, 3/2. So 3 CMC, elemental creature, flash. Whenever you cast another spell that has flash, you draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life.
Oh, this card is amazing. I think this card is super duper sweet. Yes, Teferi does nullify the entire archetype, but that's just, we already have like Simic Flash, right? Like Simic Flash is very good. So this now allows us to play Dimir Flash, and I think that whole archetype gets amazing because of cards like Dirgebat. I think Dirgebat, all of it together is just an amazing shell. Sea Dasher, Octopus, Dirgebat, this card, like Brazen Borrower, like it's gonna be amazing. I think this card is very good.
I definitely agree. I think the card is actually really strong as well with the new lands. I think you can actually just go Sultai if you want to with the Flash stack, or we had some more support for just straight up Dimir Flash if you want to go that direction. So yeah, I think the Flash archetype definitely got a lot of support. The only thing that I don't like about it is I don't think it actually works with Leyline. That was the first thing I thought of when I saw this. But technically, like Vidalcan Orrery, Leyline, they don't give your things Flash. You can just cast them as if they had Flash, which makes me a little bit sad because I want to go like full on like Leyline jank mode. But
in the main, yeah, like that's the first place my mind went to, and then I too found that out, and I was very sad. But regardless, there's just so many good things with it. Like, I mean, if I really wanted to get extra value, I guess I could play Omen. You know what I mean? Like the blue Omen that draws like 2 cards potentially. Like, I think that there's a lot of play to this. And it doesn't have any like first time each turn restriction or anything. So you can potentially like flash in multiple things and draw multiple cards. And that's exactly what you want in a tempo deck. If you look at like how Simic Flash, that's an easy example because it's semi-popular in standard. All you want to do is like stick a threat, protect that threat, which often requires drawing more cards like Curious Obsession did. So you can keep drawing more counters to keep protecting your threats and then just use that to win the game while you're, before your opponent can stabilize or recover or deal with a threat. This does it all by itself. Like it is the flash threat. It sits out and draws you extra cards so you keep hitting more disruption to keep your threats alive. So this feels just like it's built for that style of deck. I even think it even pings the opponent.
Yeah, it gets in some damage as well. I think this might even have some potential in older formats too, like a 3/2 with flash for 3. That's fairly efficient. And we have Vendilion clicks, we have a lot of threats, so I think that it could possibly even be some sort of like tempo-y deck in other formats that might want Slitherwisp too.
The first thing I thought of was fairies. I wanted to see if is fairies playable now?
Like, it's not a fairy.
It's not a fairy, but it's an honorary fairy with that ability. Like that, just you draw a card. It's not even legendary. It's so good.
Yeah, this is interesting. Nightbook Ambusher is like a heck of a magic card. So I don't. We'll see if people want to go Simic or Dimir, because this actually. The clock is actually pretty real on this because they lose a life every time you cast a flash card. So it actually does a lot of damage as well. But Nightpack Ambusher just like sits there and takes over the game. But I don't know that you can play both together though. That's like tough, right? Like
we got the
color
now.
Requirements.
Yes,
let me hold up my counter magic with tapped lands.
I do think the Triland, the Sultai one or whatever the new name is a free roll in the Dimir Flash deck. I don't even think it's that bad, to be honest with you. They already play Fabled Passage in the Simic version.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, granted, the Fabled Passage is untapped after the third land or whatever, but I don't know, you get a cycle, all that, and Dimir has a lot going for it. And I think I'm pretty high on Dirgebat. I'm not even kidding you. It's a really good card. I think that card is amazing. You can attack, and if your opponent tries to do anything fancy, you mutate the Dirgebat onto it, which has flash, and then you draw a card and ping for 1. Like, that seems really good.
I actually think Dirge Bat is really good too, and I haven't heard anyone except you talking about it. But that was we were banning about our like top 10 list, and that was a card that was definitely in the conversation for my top 10 standard cards when we were working on it.
Yeah, it's amazing. That and Slitherwisp are just
But Octopus,
I mean,
draw like 2 cards.
you have the whatever the Kraken thing where whenever you draw a card, you get a 1/1 on top of that. Oh man. Don't actually play that. It doesn't have flash.
All right. So I think those are all the main cards we want to talk about. There are a ton of cards, so you can check them out on the website. But I think it's time to move on to Fishmail this week. So if you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. So this week, most questions were related to previews. So I think we covered most of them, but I do have one question we want to get to from Fun and James 85. Wait, the Asian Avenger took a class from Tolarian College? Stories, please. Krim, are you a student of the professor?
I mean, I was not enrolled in his class back because he taught at my local college here, and I had a friend who took his class, and I would go visit them, and I would always just sit in on his class and like listen to his lectures and whatnot. So
was this before or after he was the professor?
Before he was the professor.
Oh, so he was just you're like, who's this random guy? And then years later, you're like, I took his classes.
He looked familiar, and I don't think I confirmed it until like we did the Chalice event, and I was like, by chance, did you also teach here? Because like you look really familiar. And it turns out, small world. Yeah, I sat in on tons of his classes. And he was nice enough to let me stay, because normally teachers just kick you out if you didn't enroll, right? Like, you're not on the sheet, get out of here.
Huh. I didn't even know.
What are the chances?
Like how small the class? Like when I went to school, like the class was big enough that I don't think the professor even knew everyone in the class, right? So you could just sit wherever you want.
I think it's like 30 people.
Oh, okay. So it's small enough that you would actually recognize all the faces.
Yeah, it wasn't like a huge, gigantic auditorium or anything. It was just like, it was funny because he told me, yeah, I do remember you, because I literally would visit my friend almost every day after class, and I just sit in his, like, I pretty much got a free lesson from him.
All right. That's a cool story. So thank you to everyone who sent in fish mail this week. We went long due to previews, so next week we'll be back on schedule. So send in your fish mail to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 272 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard Grimm, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Spikes Academy for supporting the show. So we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, this is the crew signing out.